The South Asian Speakers Series presents the archaeologist and adventurer Indiana Jones. But if you ask me, Indiana Jones said, it belongs in a museum. He paused to let that sink in. He was sitting on stage across from the moderator, an Indian woman whose name he had failed to catch. Her legs were crossed at the knee. The legs, he'd remember. He reached for a glass of water on the tiny table between them and sipped. The moderator uncrossed her legs and shifted to face the audience. Let's pause here and take some questions. He followed her gaze to the masses overflowing in the aisles, lined up along the walls. And for the first time that evening, he tried to distinguish faces. Many of them were colored. Faces of color, not a bad thing. His best friend was an Egyptian. A microphone was passed to the first questionnaire, a brown-skinned man. Thank you for your talk, Dr. Jones. I'm wondering about the Indian village, the one that sent you on your quest to retrieve a mystical stone. Ah, the Sankara stone, correct. The villagers sent me to retrieve it and to save their kidnapped children from a demonic cult. Yes, I was just wondering what the village was called. I don't remember. You don't remember? Look, I had just ridden a raft down a waterfall. Forgive me if I don't remember the name of the village. Indy grinned in a way that he hoped was charming. I believe it was Mayapur, the moderator filled in, consulting her notes. Ah, yeah, that's it, Mayapur, Indy said. And the leader of the village was named Shaman. Shaman, the questioner said. Just Shaman. Correct. So, if I went to this Mayapur and went around asking for a guy named Shaman, people would be like, oh yeah, Shaman lives over on, I don't know, Cherokee Street. Look, pal, I don't know what your problem is. My problem is that all these names sound made up. Yeah, well, all names are made up. Hey, I was named after my pet dog. Some people laugh. Indy prompted the next question. It came from a pretty woman in a clingy skirt. Hi, Dr. Jones, she said. And as she went on, he found himself recalling a student, a girl from his teaching days. You mentioned that at the Maharaja's banquet, you were served a dessert of chilled monkey brains? He nodded, still thinking of the student who used to sit in the front row of his history class. Once, on her eyelids, she had written him a message. Love, on the right eyelid, and you on the left. Some say this idea of Asians eating monkey brains is an urban legend based on a misunderstanding of the Chinese Hawu Tu Wu, which translates to monkey head mushroom. Could it be that you ate monkey head mushroom soup? It's a Manchurian dish. Indy recalled the way his former student had closed and opened her eyes. Love you. Love you. It was sort of disgusting to think of her writing on her own eyelids, but kind of amazing too. What wouldn't she do? Dr. Jones? The questioner said. Indy looked to the moderator, who was also looking at him illegibly. Look, I just ate what I was told to eat, he said. Silence. He took a long gulp of water. The world had grown unfriendly to his form of research, or what he wouldn't give to be back in the jungles of Honduras, or jumping trains across Nazi-occupied Europe where he could let his whip do the talking. He had taken this gig for the honorarium, namely. For the final question, the moderator pointed to a tiny woman with billowing black hair. "Mr. Jones," she said, already annoying him, for he had a PhD. "How would you respond to the claim that you are more of a grave robber than an archaeologist? And is there merit to the argument that these relics belong not in European museums, but in the places where they've been looted from?" "Look, you know what?" Indy said. "I have a couple questions. Have you been whipped and force-fed the blood of Kali? Have you been crippled by a voodoo doll? I did all that, not for myself, but for the villagers of that village and their children. I'm the good guy here, not the bad guy." "Dr. Jones," the moderator said, "the question had to do with looted objects." "Well, guess what? Joke's on you." His voice trailed off. He was thinking of the Holy Grail, the cup of the King of Kings, falling out of his grasp, tumbling into the chasm beneath the Temple of the Sun. And wasn't it always like that? Hadn't every object he'd ever loved finally eluded him, vanishing even further into the vault of history? Quietly, he said, "I've never put anything in a museum." He looked at the floor. The general murmur was excruciating. Eventually, he heard the gentle voice of the moderator. "Indiana. Indiana." Her tone sounded so much like his father's right then. He looked into her warm brown eyes. "Indy, we brought you here to talk." "Yeah, I am talking." No, so that we can talk to you." She gave him a sympathetic smile. "Indy, the truth is that many of us find you very heroic and very sexy. But this Indian mission is confusing. On the one hand, we are flattered. On the other hand, we are angry. It's just the circle that's hard to square, you know?" Indy sighed. He knew. Things had gotten weird in India. Deep down, he had always known. "Can we agree, Indy, that India was a misstep? That you should stick to fighting Nazis?" "Well, theoretically, sure. But the Nazi party is defunct. And yet, there are still Nazis. There will always be Nazis." He frowned, suspicious. As he looked out to the audience, he could see waves of nodding faces confirming the ever-presence of Nazis. His gaze fixed on the red exit sign, glowing like the fiery Sankara stone. "Well then," he said, "I guess I've got work to do." He reached down beneath his chair and retrieved the fedora he stored behind his ankles all this time, the hat that had seen him through every adventure, and set it on his head. He got up and jogged sideways down the stairs. As he made his way down the center aisle, people began to clap, uncertainly at first. It didn't matter. He was grateful. They had saved him.